Hi there. My name is Don Seaman. I'll be your worship associate this morning. Welcome to First Parish Unitarian Universalist. And this morning I'm joined by our co-minister and our co-ministers, Reverend Clyde Grubbs and Reverend Dr. Clyde Grubbs and Reverend Dr. Michelle Walsh, and our ministerial intern, Elizabeth Foster. And we're also joined today by our guest speaker, Claire Karl B.W. Müller. Did I say it correctly? All right. They are a force of nature. They are a fifth-generation Germanic settler into eastern Massachusetts and identify as a white, middle-class, non-binary, small-fat, queer organizer. Their values are curiosity, compassion, truth, and people power. They feel called to work with other white middle-class folks on racial, economic, and climate justice, and joined the team at UU Mass Action in 2020. They have organized at the local, state, and federal level on climate and environmental justice since 2007, winning victories to stop pipelines, transition coal-fired power plants to solar, and build community. Claire Karl is coordinator of the statewide Climate Justice Coalition Mass Power Forward, which they co-founded in 2015, as well as the UU Mass Action staff lead for Indigenous Solidarity.
So together we will read the call to worship. Spirit, undead, may we be with one another in solidarity and struggle. May the presence of one another across oceans of separation allow us hope and optimism to rise. Now we read the covenant, which is on the next page. Together. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth is examined, and service is prayer. To dwell together in peace, with understanding, to seek freedom and bring freedom, to serve our fellows and humankind, to the end that all souls will grow together in harmony. Thus do we covenant with each other, and we have we worship.
We're going to have an old Indian story today, and there are a lot of different versions of this story from different regions, but this particular one is called Strength and Unity, and it was collected in Ancient Stories for Modern Times. A dark cloud of worry spread through the forest. No longer were the hunters satisfied with capturing birds in their snares one at a time. They had developed a new technology. They were taking long strands of fiber, crisscrossing them one strand against the other, and then tying the strands fast at those intersections. Do you know what they were making? Yes, someone said nets. They were making nets. Now, instead of capturing a single bird, they could capture a handful, a dozen, or even hundreds of birds all at once. The birds that escaped this new invention were frightened. What could they do? Some birds lost all hope. It's pointless, they piped with feeble voices. There's no way we can escape this horror. We might as well give up now. Others got very busy building up their muscle strength and sharpening their bills. If I get caught, boasted those birds, I think I can cut my way free, and I'll be strong enough to fly away. It was encouraging to hear hope, but not all of the birds liked the brazen approach of the strong birds. Some of the birds said, well, if I escape while my friends die, my life will be filled with unhappiness. A meeting of all the birds was called. The birds talked back and forth. Caw, 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 to wit, to woo, chick, 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 cuckoo. It might not mean anything to you, but it meant a lot to the birds. And at last, the birds had a plan. And sure enough, it wasn't long before they had a chance to test it. Peep, many birds heard the call, a call of distress, but who was it? Birds of all shape and size flew toward the sound. They landed on the branches of a big tree. But where was the injured bird? They couldn't see anyone. Suddenly they were trapped beneath a large net. It had been a trick, and now they could barely move. Some of the birds panicked and started crying out, but others remained calm. Soon a whisper ran through the whole flock of birds that had been caught. Take a deep breath. Remember our plan. When the King of Birds sings, let us all flap our wings. The whisper was repeated, and soon it resounded from one end of the net to the other. Take a deep breath. Remember the plan. When the King of Birds sings, let us all flap our wings. The birds breathed in, and the king whistled a plaintive note, and the birds began to flap their wings. It was very hard work. When it began to feel impossible for some of the birds, they looked over at their neighbors who were also hard at work, and they felt encouraged. They continued to flap their wings, and suddenly they all lifted right out of that tree. They rose higher and higher into the air, carrying the net with them. The king whistled a plaintive note once more, and the birds tilted their bodies to the side in unison as though they were one giant bird. The net slid off their back, and it dropped to the ground. And after that, a new melody could be heard in the forest among all the birds. Their strength in unity. Their strength in unity. That is the story of how the birds met their worst fears. And it is also the story of how we can meet ours.
No This is a poem by Adrienne Marie Brown that she wrote in 2016 after the very, very large women's marches that happened across the country. It's written from the perspective of an octopus, and it's called How to Welcome. Oh, you came. You came to make the world. I'm so glad you're here. This is your house too, you know. As you can see, it is a mess. I would apologize, but such a mess took many people's forgetting, even yours. It needs all of us. Sweeping up detritus, mending reef, sinking ink into the cold depths, listening to the waves and whale mantras, even though we have been divided many times, even though we have lost the words. We get still, listening for a way and then a next way, relinquishing the idea that there is one way. Some of us were born here in this mess. We have been making the world since forever, and before that, and before. My mother makes the world with love. My grandmother seasons it with sacrifices. My great-grandmothers keep its secrets. Now you, bright-minded, free-bodied, vulgar, tender, honest humans, ancient and pulsing still with desire, tired of effort, who can't yet turn away, and the so young humans just beginning, and the babies rooting the masses in future. Yes, you came. I see you, humans, on the edge of your hearts, who love the world but cannot admit it, who seem to learn by destruction, consumption. You are welcome. Even though we have needed you and needed you, you are welcome even now. You came, and we hope you never leave. We are the creatures who have learned how to live beyond caring what others think of our freedoms. We are the wild ones who will not relinquish any of our sentience, and we are making the world. From this place, this day, abundant paths unfurl in many million directions. We say, tend the ones that call to you. All of it is ours. Again and again, welcome. May your first taste change your life, for the making goes ever and onwards, and tomorrow is our blessing.
All right, so I invite everyone to find a comfortable way to sit in your pews or wherever you're seated online as we enter into a time of quiet meditation and prayer. And just bring your attention first to the breath. Again, so often we're rushing through our days that we forget to notice and appreciate the fact that we're breathing. The breath is life, the spirit of life. If there are any parts of your body that are feeling sore or tense, you can invite them to relax if they're willing and able. And if not, just apply a warm, welcoming, healing attention. And again, you can shrug your shoulders up, drop them down, roll your neck, as we carry a lot of tension in those parts of our body. Invite the muscles of your face to soften and relax. And if you can invite a half smile to come to your lips as we invite the bell to sound 3 times and sit quietly together, and then I'll invite it to sound again and we'll have a moment of prayer. God of many names and no names, many genders and no gender, and whom we know within our Unitarian Universalist faith tradition as that precious and mysterious spirit of life and love that moves in us and among us and out into our larger world, bringing our faith out into the larger world. This morning, we are grateful for those among us and those who have now moved into being our ancestors, such as Myrtle, for the examples that they set, the role modeling that they set of the persistence of the human spirit as a source of resistance to injustice. We lift up those in Ukraine as well as in Israel and Palestine and Gaza who also are lifting up the human spirit as a source of resistance. The acts of solidarity, small and large, that demonstrate hope in our larger world. And we lift up the resistance and resiliency among us as we learn to care for one another in new ways, to support one another through transitions, through losses known and unknown, through illness known and unknown, in all the ways that we find sustenance, renewal, from the beauty of all the creatures of this planet and nature itself. Let us take in all of that beauty and role modeling of resistance and bring it to one another as a reminder so that we do not forget that together, in solidarity with one another, we are stronger and we can surmount so much and bring forth a world of justice and equity and beloved community. May it all be so. Blessed be. Amen.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the invitation to be with you today. I'm really glad to be here. Today I want to talk about UU Mass Action, our solidarity model, and how the practice of solidarity is an invitation to be fully ourselves, fully human together. Before I get into all of that, I want to share a bit about myself and how I came to decide that solidarity work is my life's purpose. For one, I figured out at a pretty young age that I'm not happy with the status quo. My ancestors have been in eastern Massachusetts for 5 to 15 generations, depending on which line you look at. I'm at least 11 kinds of European: Irish, Welsh, Scottish, English, French, German, Eastern European, Swedish, Norwegian, and the Balkans. Perhaps you're all my cousins. And I'm a spiritual, emotional, curious person, always have been. And as an adolescent, I began to ask, who are we? What are our songs, our food, our language, our traditions, our traditional clothes, our stories? I wanted to be connected to my heritage, to my people. And the answer I got was, no, we're American. Don't look back. And it wasn't until I was older that I understood what that really meant, that my ancestors had traded those things for white privilege in white assimilation, and that that connection was not there. I was heartbroken. I'm still heartbroken about it. My brother, growing up, had health challenges. and he was bullied by neighborhood boys. I tried to protect him, even though I was the younger, only assigned female in the neighborhood, and became a target of childhood sexual abuse. And by the time I graduated high school, I was livid. I had learned about the war on terror, the hole in the ozone, and multinational corporations using sweatshop labor. I was like, what is happening in this world? It feels like it needs a lot of fixing. And my mother, she pegged me senior year. She looked at me and said, you are going to the nonprofit sector. You're going to try and save the world, aren't you? And I looked at her and said, yes, I am. Thanks for noticing me. When I was 20, I took time off from college and I volunteered in New Orleans post-Katrina for 7 months. I was in one of the most devastated neighborhoods, the lower 9th Ward. It had been underwater for months, up to 12 feet deep in some areas. It was the last neighborhood to have power and water service restored, and it was one of the blackest neighborhoods in a black city. At 20, I was good with computers and people, so they said, hey you, why don't you answer the phone at the desk when people call, trying to get access to services. We would try to do things like connect displaced neighbors with their family members who had been sent in buses to different places. Thanks, Michelle. And it was a really impactful time for me, being in New Orleans. But I didn't understand yet. I had to ask myself and figure out, was I here in solidarity or was I there in charity? I'll pause again. My heart going to anywhere that siren is going. I had been driven to go there to New Orleans. I had felt called, but I wasn't sure why. And when I sat at that desk, there was a quote on the wall that I would stare at every single day. It's a quote by Leela Watson in so-called Australia. She's an Aboriginal justice activist. And it said, if you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. And I used to stare at it all day. I didn't get it. How was my liberation bound up in New Orleans? I didn't know, and I felt like there was something I was missing, something really important. And this is something that I try to be cautious about every day in my work. I come from a Protestant background. I'm white, I'm middle class. And unfortunately, Christianity has a strong momentum of charity, of trying to help people, but actually deeply harming them. By accidentally oppressing whole groups of people in the name of love. Most of colonization has been justified through helping Indigenous people find God, for example. We know it's not enough to have good intentions, right? There's also a deep paternalism that can happen in charity work, where the helpers are the parents and the helpless are infantilized as children, where we take care of people and help them, but we do so in ways that we have decided are good for them. That is not solidarity among equals. I've always gotten the sense from that quote from Leela Watson that she wanted me to walk side by side with her, hand in hand as equals. And so solidarity calls upon me and us to examine ourselves. You know, it's easy for me to see how Black, Indigenous, people of color, and other frontline identities are hurt and harmed by the status quo. And maybe you hold some of those identities. I myself am non-binary, And it is very easy for me to see how the gender binary is harmful, not just to me, but to everyone. But for the other identities, it's not always easy for me to see how I'm hurt by white supremacy, how I'm hurt by anti-blackness or classism. And that's the thing that I have to always think about to be grounded, to be in solidarity, is to figure out, how am I hurt by those systems? How is my liberation wrapped up in Black, Indigenous, people of color, and other oppressed peoples? Black feminist Barbara Smith, she put it really simply: until Black women are free, none of us will be free. UU Mass Action is a statewide nonprofit. We're here for UUs to live their values in action at the state level. Working in solidarity, we have 5 critical social justice campaigns that you can take action in. We work on climate, immigration, housing, Indigenous solidarity, and decarceration. And we do this work specifically from a solidarity orientation. We work to build authentic, real relationships with frontline organizations, organizations for and by these oppressed identities, so that we are not deciding for them, here's how you need help. We're taking the direction from them when they say, hey, UU Mass Action, we need you here. We believe and see again and again that these organizations and movements, they've got some of the best information about what is happening in that oppression, because they bump up against it every day. The same way I can see every day the way the gender binary is happening. I bump up against it every day. When you bump up against the oppression regularly, you get a really strong sense of its shape and how it works. And when you get together with other people, you can build a vision, build solutions. And that's what these organizations have, is a clear direction for all of our liberation, the clearest path. As a white middle-class person, I have been taught that I have it all, that because I have privilege, that this is the destination that everyone wants to be at. I think that's part of the lie. Because under this status quo, under racial, colonial capitalism, I'm not actually okay. As I told you from my young life, I'm not whole. And I don't think that any of us are. So to find my way out of that charity mindset to solidarity, I think about that. I think, how is it really that I'm not okay? And I'll be honest, this process can take vulnerability, it can take discomfort. But I want to share with you about each of our campaigns and how I find my liberation tied up in each of them. So first, let me talk about how my liberation is tied up in immigrant justice. So in this status quo, immigrants are not seen as fully human. For me, my entire adult life, perhaps you've had this experience too, I've worried about money, getting access to good health care, access to affordable housing. I worry about my family members who are aging and how they will manage in this status quo. Our current nation does not provide a solid sense of security. But core to immigrant justice is hospitality. It's welcoming our siblings and ensuring that their needs are met. Come, we're so glad you're here. Let us help you get housed, fed, educated. It is where the inherent worth and dignity of every human is honored. If that society came about because of immigrant justice, I know I would also be taken care of. Let me talk about how my liberation is wrapped up in decarceration. ending solitary confinement, dismantling the prison system. So our prison system, it's built on a punishment mindset. It's centered on the idea that mistakes that you make should be met with punishment. I don't know about you, but I've made mistakes, sometimes quite big ones. And because of this momentum in our society that when you make a mistake, you should be punished, there have been times when I have, after making a mistake, questioned my own worth. Am I still good? And I have spiraled out into darkness, wondering if everybody knew what I had done, would they still like me? I have felt unlovable. So when we end solitary confinement, when we dismantle the prison system, it will be because we believe in each other's goodness, because we believe that when you make a mistake, it should be met with kindness, with healing and repair, not punishment. So when we create this society around this, I know I will definitely be better. Let me talk about how my liberation is tied up with environmental justice. Climate and environmental injustice are possible because under the status quo of racial capitalism, some people, people of color especially, are considered expendable. This idea has allowed the air to be polluted, the water to be poisoned, and the climate to be changing around us. I am also worried about being polluted. I am also worried about getting cancer, about the 80,000 toxic chemicals that are not regulated hardly at all in the US market. I worry about storms, floods, heat wave. This is already happening to frontline communities. But under climate and environmental justice, we would all have clean air, clean water, and a stable climate. And lastly, let me share my liberation and how it's tied up with Indigenous justice. I already told you about how my ancestors assimilated to whiteness, separating themselves from each other, from our past, and from the land. In my life, I have felt lonely. I have felt isolated. I've struggled with depression. Core to Indigenous justice is restoring relationship to each other, to land, to place. I dream about living under Indigenous sovereignty with an abundant worldview, with respect for all things. I imagine how my loneliness would fade into belonging in a society grounded in Indigenous values. And so I've found, and with discipline, put my finger on my stake, how I walk hand in hand with each of these movements. I'm not the person getting hit hardest in each of these categories, but nor am I unscathed. When frontline communities are well, I will be well. I will be much better. Because we are all being poisoned by patriarchal racial capitalism. And I want to be clear, this isn't just a thought exercise. It's also because when I move out of that charity mindset and I see myself in these movements, I'm actually doing and capable of the best activism. I'm neither selfless, just helping and giving, nor am I selfish, taking and taking just for me. I'm there grounded in the center, in me, and what I want for my future and my descendants and for all of us. Grounded in this way, I show up better. I go to inconvenient actions, webinars, the meetings, oh my gosh, the meetings, so many meetings. I do uncomfortable things. I call legislators, I make phone calls asking people for money. I take feedback more gracefully. All of this discomfort comes more easily when I'm grounded in why my liberation is tied up together. I'm more likely to be walking hand in hand. I and UU Mass Action and all of our frontline partners, we need you to win these campaigns and move towards a world more just, more aligned with UU values. We need you to show up, and we need you to show up in a good way. And so I ask you to search your soul. Find how your liberation is bound up in these movements where maybe you have wounds, where you have been hurt by the status quo, even if you have privilege. And it's not always obvious. I didn't get it when I was 20, staring at that poster. It took me years to discern. I felt compelled, I felt called to go down to New Orleans that year, but I didn't know why. Whatever your passion is, climate, immigration, housing, something else, I invite you to really ask yourself, why? Why am I passionate about this? What about it strikes a chord? Where is the wound in me that this is also healing? And if it's not clear, it's okay. The heart learns what the hands do. So I invite you to join me at UU Mass Action. Join one of our campaigns, if you're not already. Our campaigns are built on relationships, and so I'll be excited to be connected with you. I invite you to push yourself, to come be in solidarity. Our annual Advocacy Day is coming up in March. It's an easy way to get plugged in. And at coffee hour, I'll also invite you to fill out an interest card. You can join our newsletter to learn more about what we're working on. But regardless, thank you for everything that you do. And I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Your ministers have been involved in the Indigenous Solidarity Working Group, and again, we're very pleased that the board here Parish Committee here has endorsed all 5 pieces of legislation that UU Mass Action has been working on in solidarity. Definitely invite you to meet with Claire Karl in the service, after the service, and find out more about the different campaigns. Let's join together in our closing hymn, number 1024, When the Spirit Says Do, in your teal hymnal, number 1024. I invite everybody to rise in body and spirit, and Jim will let us know which verses we're singing.
Well, I'll start with the verse that's in the hymnal, which is, you got to do when the Spirit says do. And then we're going to change that verb on the next 3 verses. Our second verse will be, you've got to sing when the Spirit says sing. Then you've got to dance when the Spirit says dance. And we'll end with, you've got to shout when the Spirit says shout. So you can think of an acronym, DSDS. Do, sing, dance, shout.
Let's rise in body and spirit. As you will and able. which is on that second page. And that's say together. When we say go in peace, we don't mean go in mindless oblivion. When we say go in peace, we don't mean go without challenging yourself or others. When we say go in peace, we don't mean go in utter ease and comfort. When we say go in peace, we mean go in peace seeking justice. We mean go in peace committed to equal rights and opportunities for all. When we say go in peace, we mean go in the peace that is created when together we build communities of true solidarity, deep compassion, and fierce, unrelenting love. Go in peace. And let's join in our unison extinguishing of the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Blessed be. I invite you to sit for Jim's posting.